This is the Transparency Podcast Show.
Let me ask you a little bit more of a community question. Because I know we've talked about this before, why are you drawn to work with the trans community, with our community? Why do you work with us?
You know, what I've found out through the process, and I've been working with the trans community for 10 years now, such appreciation for the work that I do. They're so happy to have the hair removal. It's more of an appreciation, and you develop a relationship. Totally. And I really admire all that you have to go through to get to become the authentic you. And I am an intricate part of that.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
I feel very fortunate to be able to do this.
Yeah.
You know, I was going to say, I've been coined as the transgender midwife,
Nice.
you know, by some
Nice.
people. And, you know, I have the privilege of helping and facilitate this beautiful journey for transgender, gender transition, and help bring you, you know, into this new world.
Yeah.
You know, it's a rite of passage. The transition is a sacred place and self-development and growth, and it's a journey of rebirth and a passage into a new, you know, life.
Right.
And I get to be part of that process. So I'm very, very happy and very proud that I get to be part of the transition that y'all get to go through.
And for me, you've been such a big part. I remember some of my first times I was so nervous and scared and unsure of myself. And then to how our relationship has developed, and the encouragement you've been for me has been amazing. And that you've been there every step of the way, and in a very intimate, sometimes awkward place.
Well, I want to provide a safe and comfortable healing space that allows you to feel comfortable. I mean, many clients are in that cocoon stage where they're not there and they're not here.
Right.
So I want my space to feel like you're sort of in the middle, you know, and there's magic in the middle. And I am very happy to be able to provide that sort of space for everybody, but especially I've developed so many great friendships that have lasted way beyond surgery, way beyond my electrolysis, and it's been just wonderful.
Right.
Because I'm involved with the community.
Of course, so that's why we're having you here to share with everyone about your background, your own stories, and you are I would say you're the creator of a trans community, right? Because you change people's life, and of course for good. And a lot of people I can see they can improve their happiness. They can improve their career in every different aspect.
So again, thank you for the kind words. And I think my own personal story is less important in the big picture here. But really, this is about making people comfortable in their skin.
Right. Yes. So how can you kind of tell us a little bit about your story? How did you start getting involved into it, to doing the change for the
right? Well,
community?
okay. So my first exposure, let's say, to the trans community was when my mother used to dress me up. No, okay, no.
Okay, really? Wow.
Let me stay away from that.
That's really
but
transparent.
I will go right. That was really
Right.
transparent. Somebody was at my house yesterday, and they said, "Who's that woman there?" And I said, "That's me." But that was me when I was 12 years old. Okay, so but I also grew up in New York City, and one of the things I ended up doing was doing some off-Broadway shows.
Okay. Wow.
And one of the casts I was in was largely a trans cast.
Oh, okay.
And so
That's
the
interesting.
theater was La Mama Theater, which was on 2nd Avenue in New York City in the East Village. And there was a club called Club 82, which was the transgender club in New York City. And then I went on to go to medical school, and I did a rotation at Stanford University. And in those days, most of the transgender surgery was not being done at universities. In fact, there were only 2 or 3 that were doing it. But Stanford had a department chairman, Donald Laub, who was very involved with again, this concept of change.
Right.
And so he was doing transgender surgery. And that was my first, let's say, surgical involvement with it. And then I went through the usual training of going through general surgery, going through plastic surgery. And at a certain point in my career, I started just doing more and more transgender surgical procedures, and then dealing with other transgender surgeons and sharing ideas and honing my technique.
Okay.
My first exposure, I guess, to this world was when I was 14 years old. And I was friends with a local drag queen named Chantel Austin. And she invited me to come photograph one of her performances. As a boy, he ran this pet store that I used to go to when I had this little baby snake. So I'd go in on Saturdays and I would buy baby mice. And one time I came in and I happened to have my camera around my neck, and he came screaming up to me, oh my gosh, are you a photographer? And I made a joke. I said, no, actually, I just wear this around my neck to meet boys. And he just looked at me and I said, see, it worked. So anyway, we started talking. He said, our regular photographer is canceled. We have this huge performance in a couple of days. Can you come down to Civic Center Park? And I said, Civic Center Park? That is the People's Fair. He says, yeah, we're going to do a little show there. He didn't tell me that it was the main stage and there was 15 other drag queens, and it was like the main attraction. The Civic Center Park holds, 500,000 people once a year. So I was, of course, nervous as a cat, but I got there early to let everybody know that I was there. And I went backstage and I watched him go from a furry farm boy with overalls and muddy boots, I knew him as Perry. But that day, he turned into Barbara Streisand right in front of me. Wow. I watched him do this incredible makeover that literally, like from shaving all the way to taping his hair, or taping his face all out. And when he turned around, I got goosebumps because it was just like Barbara Streisand. If you would have seen him at the airport, he would have gotten smothered for autographs. That's how much he looked like Barbara Streisand. And I'll never forget that day. People ask me all the time how I got into this, and that was the day, because I watched him turn from a man into this incredibly glamorous, elegant woman, and I thought, oh my God, I have to do that. So long story short, he kind of took me under his wing and introduced me to all the other drag queens. Later, when I brought all of the photos in for them to all see, because I had like a couple hundred 8x10s that I toiled over in my darkroom at home. I made all these color 8x10s and brought them in. And all the queens were sitting around this big table at this, like a Denny's kind of restaurant. And they looked at them and just, oh, swoon, you're only 14. Oh my God. And they invited me to all the shows. And before I knew it, they were taking care of me. When I got sick, they'd bring soup and coming over and kind of helping me fix up my apartment and everything. And I learned makeup from her.
Amazing.
Wow.
But it was many years later that I wanted to actually pursue it as a career. I went through the music industry and publishing and all this other stuff. When I moved to LA is when I decided to go full bore with it.
So you kind of, because drag queen is more like a showbiz. So the makeup is kind of different from, let's say, a trans person per se, right?
Very much.
So how do you like doing drag queen for the show to... meaning like have clients for like trans people that want to be.
It's a good thing that you asked me that because I met a lot of trans people along the way when I was hanging around in the drag circles, because back in Denver in the 80s, that's the only place they could go out.
80s.
Was a drag club.
Okay.
And so transgender people were still in very deep hiding back then.
Yeah.
I was just a kid. And so to see a trans person out in the normal world, they were subject to all kinds of terrible
trouble.
And I think, I think that was part of my need, I guess, if you will, not the desire, but the need to help them. Because there was no one else that would. There was nowhere else they could go. I was already used to that world. I was already more comfortable in that world than I was the straight world.
Right.
Anyway, because I felt kind of rejected from that part of society too in my own way. And it felt like whenever I was working with a queen or with a trans woman, that it was like sort of all in the family. It was kind of like our little club, and that we could be ourselves and we could listen to the music we loved and we could dance around and we could be silly without being judged.
Right.
And so I always
Exactly.
felt that that was more for me.